My body's temperature begins to rise. Hello, friends and family of City Press. My name is Mpho Molepo. Today I am joined by the veteran actor and director Mpho Molepo, who is currently directing the version of Sarafina that is being staged at the Johannesburg Theatre. Good morning,
Good morning, buddy.
I'm okay, how are you?
Sharp.
Wow. When I saw you on Sunday before I saw the show, I actually was thinking to myself, I wonder what his directorial take is going to look like. It's actually quite great. What I would like you to start with, take me through the casting process rather, because when I looked at those artists, those performers, they have a striking resemblance to the actual original cast.
And we never looked at that, eh?
I noticed it.
Yes, we never looked at that, but we did an open auditions for 2 days here at the Civic, and a lot of people came from all over the country, and we made the choices. And I think what was in the back of my mind all the time was, I believe strongly that the first cast that did Sarafina was at this age when they started.
Yes, they were young.
And so I was looking for young people,
of course,
that can be able to tell the story. And but also we were supported by, I think, four to five of the old actors that have been there to help us speed up the process. We had a very limited time to do it.
I'm actually laughing when you mention the ages, because before I got on camera, my colleague Umahlatsi was asking Uguti, why do we have the new actors on the poster? And I'm just thinking, Uguti, like after having seen the show, I don't know if a lot of 50-year-olds have got that kind of energy. That show needs stamina.
No, that's why I'm saying that when they did it, the actual cast itself was the same age as most of these young people. And I mean, I find them very interesting because majority are still very young. So it's also easy to work with them. Yeah. They take direction much more easier, and they are very inquisitive. They want to know and they want to learn. So that's what made this production to be what it is because the process was quite much simpler, because I had a generation of young people that really just wanted to do Sarafina. Speaking
of the process, before we got on camera, you also spoke about how you took the cast to Morris Isaacson High School. You took them to the Hector Peterson Museum.
So to itself.
Yeah. So I want you to please take me through, because you and I come from a theatre background.
Yes.
And I know that we learned a lot about characterization from a theatre perspective. Take me through the research and the characterization, because one of the things that I also noticed, apart from the physical resemblance to the cast, particularly actually in terms of physical resemblance, the actor who plays Crocodile, he looks extremely like the original actor.
No, he's one of the oldest.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been in the production for most years. Yeah.
But why I want to talk about...
But remember, it's not the original like in the film.
Yes.
Of course. Else, yeah.
But why I want to talk about characterization, because I've seen Sarafina both on stage and on TV before, and they've got the mannerisms of the original cast on lockdown. It's very hard to tell Uguti these are new actors who are playing the show.
Yeah, let's say for example, Mistress, I think it's first time she's playing the character, but which is something interesting. I said to someone, are you sure you'll be able to do Sarafina? And I said, yeah, after I've read the script, I think it's a show that I could be able to pull, but it requires a lot of memory. Yeah. Because you are not trying to reimagine the production. Yes. You are literally restaging it.
The same way we do with Shakespeare.
Yeah, so there are a lot of other things that
okay.
Yeah, when it was restaged at State Theatre, I was working there. Okay. I think I might have seen some part of the first half not finished on that day because I was at work.
Busy, yeah.
And then I have seen the other part, but I've seen it in bits and pieces. Yeah,
And you've seen various stagings of it, right?
Yeah, I think I've seen two versions of it, but not full on.
Yeah.
But when I went to the rehearsal room, I did not go to the rehearsal room with that memory myself.
I see.
You know, I'm working with the choreographer who choreographed the previous one, and I'm working with the music director who did music previously, and then we have those 5 to 6 actors that are old. So part of the process was more communal in one way or the other, in terms of, do you remember that? Do you remember that? And as a director, you will then look at that and see how do you enhance it, and how do you make it look fresh, and how do you then push actors to be able to deal with it. So for me, it was that. It was more communal process, which I really enjoyed, because then the last person to polish that and to work on that becomes me.
I mean, I like what you're saying about the collaboration part of it, because I think a lot of the times the best theatre shows that we've had are shows that were actually workshopped. Before we continue, I would just like to put it out there. After this interview, I'm never going to bring my phone again. I'm going to go back to using my notebook, because I actually just realized, when I'm on my phone, it may look to you guys as if I'm being disrespectful and going through my phone, but I actually wrote my questions on my phone. Never doing that again. I'm going back to the notebook. But okay, my first question is going to be about the music. It wasn't going to be about the music until you touched on it. But before we get to that, there's a question that I would like to get out of the way. People keep asking, Uguti, why is Sarafina still relevant? Is Sarafina in fact still relevant? And when I hear that question, I always think of Ushaka Zulu, who existed in the 1700s, and more than 2 centuries later, we are still seeing his story. So, yeah, I don't know why people ask that question, but please, why is Sarafina still relevant?
Yeah, I think the question for me, when people talk about relevance in theatre, I always find it questionable, because relevance to what? Because stories are stories to be told.
Yes.
And sometimes in theatre we usually say, now it's a classic because of its age and time.
Right.
Right. So, and which is something somebody asked me, so what is it that I'm going to see from Sarafina that is new? Then I said to them, why do you expect something new? Because this is a classical piece. This is an
you
honor.
can't rewrite this.
Yeah, that's an honor. We have to tell it as the way it is, because it shows somebody who's coming to watch what used to happen.
Yes.
So that they don't even forget on what used to happen. So for me, there's no reason of wanting to change or rewriting some of the lines and whatever. I mean, we're not doing that with Shakespeare. But
Speaking of
can be
Shakespeare,
taught.
actually,
We're not doing that with
so
many other productions. Jack and the Beanstalk. I mean, so many other stories that have been told from the past. And that is the question for me when it comes to a poignant story. It's something that is so historical, something that when you watch you can feel uneasy. Then people are questioning, why are you not changing some of the content?
This theatre that we are at right now, the director actually recently staged Romeo and Juliet. And when I interviewed the director, he said that, and Romeo and Juliet is from a long time ago, he said something along the lines of, when we were still discussing the same relevance theme, that that show, people think it's a love story, but it's actually about 2 kids who are battling patriarchy, who are battling all of these societal ills that we are still dealing with today. So it's exactly what you're saying.
Which is the same thing. Exactly your point. I mean, for me, Sarafina, people are saying it's about 1976. And I say it's about 1976, it's about 1986, it's about Feast Must Fall, it's about young people. In actual fact, Sarafina, it's about young people who realizes that the material conditions that they are living in is not good for them, and they fight to change their own material conditions. That's all.
Thank you for that.
So the message for anyone to watch Sarafina now, I will always say it is important that if it was according to me, we will have to go and show more young people, so that young people realizes that the future of the country and their own future is always in their hands. So young people must always rise. When Mandela started, he was a young person. So.
Okay, thank you for Mpho. The music. I'm very unhappy about Our Father. What happened to the Sarafina Our Father that we are used to? I need that Our Father.
You mean the television one? The one in the...
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy will.
Okay, there are not so many of other things, but there are quite few things that creatively we took a license just to enhance them, but also to enhance the piece itself.
Okay, all right.
But we didn't lose the essence. The song is still there.
It's still there. It's still there.
Yeah, it's just the choreography.
Mr. still says, our father must be happy wherever he is.
Yes.
So you get that. Thank you for keeping it. So now we're gonna get into the actual story. I'm gonna start with the story of the young man who was relaying how somebody was suspended outside the window of a prison cell, and they would let him drop, and then they would pull him back up, and they would let him drop, and they would pull him back up. Another story that stood out, I think it was told by Silence, where he was talking about how the father, who was stripped of his clothes, and he comes home completely butt naked and just blood dripping down his legs.
Yeah.
And it what does that do to the psyche of a young person?
Is that it will help them realize that the freedom we are in didn't come cheap or didn't come easier. So it will be very important that they become active citizens. I think one of the other things as an underlying tone about Sarafina, it's a call for active citizenship.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in politics to be active. But remember, the general atmosphere now is like we've substituted our activeness in society, in civil organizations, in youth clubs, in NGOs and everything else. We've replaced all of that with having fun. Right? But in actual fact, I think there's more need to do that kind of a call now.
Yeah.
But if you look at that story that is being told by Stimena on how Sarafina has been taken in and what happened to the friend of his who has now become a lunatic.
Yes.
So let's go to the townships now and let's look at majority of other comrades who have been detained in the past, some who have been in exile, their status as we speak, and their condition of mind as we speak. You know, I keep saying to people that one of the worst things that could have happened to us maybe as a people is that we also never focused much on rebuilding the man when we were rebuilding the country post-1994. I think we focused so much in building houses, you know, mortar, houses, hospitals and whatever.
Material things.
Yes. And I think we've forgotten the man, that the man is now injured. The man has now become a lunatic. That the men, when they get angry and things don't go their way, the first thing that they do, they burn the house that you built for them, or they burn the hospital that you built for them. It's because we just never focus so much on the mind of that man to rebuild them. And that line is repeated. You know, that's something about Sarafina which is, for me, so strong. That line is repeated also by the former student, Mpho Molepo, when he tells his story, that some of them, their bones were left scattered in the city of Gauteng. And some of them, as we speak now, they are lunatics. And that's the reality we're living with.
With the scattered scene, I think the last stage version of Sarafina that I saw, they did the same thing where when he says the bones are scattered, and then the cast does an echo, scattered, scattered, scattered. And it just makes it that much more punchy that the bones are, you can actually picture the bones being scattered.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we for me, that I kept as an emphasis around the direction of this entire production has been, if it is possible, I wouldn't like anyone to come and watch Sarafina and says it's a nice musical and they walk away that they were smiling, singing and dancing, it's so nice. I wouldn't. I would like, which is the journey that I'm traveling with the artist even now. You know, I still come to watch it every day and I still give them notes and rehearse with them. But I think one of the things that I'm now making emphasis to them is the emotional journey of the story itself. Yeah. What is it that when an audience member come to watch this piece and when they walk out, what is it that emotionally could have affected them? They walk away with. Affected them in a way that they are thinking differently about maybe the present time or the status quo around them and all of that. And that's why there's emphasis around those particular scenes that help us to travel emotionally to realize the police violence in the past, you know, how a black person was literally treated in the past, so that we remember ourselves, you know, in this freedom, you know, so that we never lose ourselves, so that we understand that we still have a journey to go to change the material conditions in our own townships. You know, black people at the moment in majority still live in conditions that are not right.
We actually have forgotten so much. I actually commented on a post on Facebook earlier this morning, because there were the two police vans, the yellow one and the white one. And they like saying this thing where they're saying, this one you used to pay cold drink, this one we were walking around freely. Black people were never walking around freely when there was the yellow van. You couldn't, the person even said they were posting from Midrand. As a black person, you would not have been allowed to be in Midrand after 5 p.m. 5 o'clock you neck off, you go home to Soweto to Alex. You're not allowed to be in Senton after 5 p.m. You will get arrested, you will die.
Something that was said by Premier came to see the piece, and he said something so, I mean, it stayed with me so much, that as black people, we should not ever even once think that us attaining this freedom was a mistake.
Yeah.
That we had to go through the journey to up to where we are. And he also used the word, we are human beings. We might have made mistakes there and there, and which I feel strongly that it was never a mistake. We arrived where we arrived at 1994. We are where we are now in 2025. But the reality is, so many other people do not remember where we came from.
Yeah.
And so many other young people do not even know.
Yeah.
Most of the young people in the piece did not understand 76 what it is. Did not literally know about, that's why we took them on a tour of Soweto.
They thought it was an actual movie. They didn't realize it was reality.
Most people have reference of a movie, you know. But I'm just saying that for them to be able to tell this story with much referencing and background, they had to go and hear the stories.
Physically from the people.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of remembering things and just keeping true to Sarafina, I wanted to find out about the soldiers. Why was a black cast used for soldiers? Because when I was discussing it in my social circle, we kind of felt like it took away the emotionality of it that you wanted the audience to live with, because it kind of felt like we're writing a story about gender-based violence and there's a woman who is killed by her husband and the person who is playing the husband is a woman. Not to say that there is no intimate partner violence in homosexual relationships. There's a lot of intimate partner violence in same-sex relationships and marriages. There is. But for this particular context, I'm talking about a husband who has been killed, who has killed his wife and is now played by a woman. I think it kind of, it removes a little bit of the impact.
No. You see, but you used two words yourself, and I know that you studied drama yourself, but you just used two beautiful words. One of the words you used was played, and the second one is character.
Okay. But why were they white? Why were they not white?
But also, it gives you more meaning that you look at human being from a human being perspective.
Right.
Beyond color and everything else. That this can still be instituted by any other human being.
It's true.
Beyond color and race. I mean, when we were young, we did a play called Stone Jack.
I remember that directed by
which was about white prisoners. But it was
an entirely black.
It was black.
I am such a hypocrite. I actually wrote an article about that. And I actually stated, was he one of the first directors to use an all black? Yeah. I am such a hypocrite.
And it was deliberate. I mean, it goes beyond color and race, but it's about the story that you are telling and how truthful you can be to the story itself.
Okay. There's something that white South Africans like to say at the moment, particularly as we are dealing with the whole Trump situation, where they will say things like, yeah, well, black people were savages, you guys were killing each other, and some black people will eat that up, but there's a lot of dishonesty in that, because they tell the story that black people were killing each other, they were necklacing each other, but they omit the part that this was all orchestrated by the apartheid government. For example, I know there's the story of Victoria Mpenge, and when you Google her, I actually even took a screenshot of what it says when you Google how did Victoria Mpenge die. Murdered on 1 August 1985. She was gunned down by 4 black men, and they actually, Google highlighted the gunned down by 4 black men part, because to me, it just seems like the narrative here is for us to think that there were just these 4 random black men who decided to kill this woman, but we're not giving the backstory to say that she was being assassinated for representing this woman in court.
Yeah.
And that pissed off the apartheid government that did not want black people to do things like she was doing.
Okay, so I'll take it back a bit, and maybe a lot of people will understand. So people describe something called black on black violence. Let's just say people use that way.
Yes.
But in actual fact, in politics, there's nothing like black on black violence. There's what we call a low intensity warfare, right? Where there's an infiltration within a black society, where now blacks are used amongst
each other. Yes.
So in what we call a low intensity warfare, which is within the same structure of let's divide them so that we can be able to rule them, right? So even if you think of the trade violence in the 80s or the IFP, ANC, whatever conflict that was there, they described it into the latter of just saying, no, that was black on black. But in actual fact, it was a low intensity warfare. You're using that to create basis of a war that can be able to explode later into a civil war in a country. Yeah. It's just that it was unfortunate that we never got there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Thank you for being honest, because I think we have to have these conversations so that we can get the correct information out there, because exactly what you are saying, it being described as black on black violence is really just taking away the truth.
What it was, yes.
Okay. There's another story of a woman who was raped by a white cop, right? She tries to say, no, Mebas, I'm a married woman, I cannot do this. And he forces himself on her, and she tries to say to him, but what you are trying to do to me, you trying to rape me, I'm going to put it out there, is illegal. Because there wasn't, sexual contact between black people and white people was not allowed by law. And he says to her, well, I am the law. We are the lawmakers. What I'm telling you is the law. But my question here is, how many more of those women's stories were not told? Because as a black woman who has just been raped by a white cop, it would it not be risking your life to go and report that something like this has just transpired?
Yeah, I mean, there's something called Immorality Act then during apartheid. And I think immorality, I think, applies in this situation, and maybe that's the technicality that how Mpho Molepo won the case, basis on Immorality Act, where white people were not allowed to then do that with black people. I mean, I'm not a lawyer per se, but the reality of our South African context is that we haven't deeply started telling our stories.
True.
Yeah. We're still so much on a surface, but also we're still so much on a surface that we're telling stories that we think might appeal to the masses, but we are not actually telling the truthful stories. You know, I keep saying to people that what happened to a story of a woman who was selling vegetables and managed to grow 2 boys or 3 boys by herself through tomatoes, and today those boys are lawyers and doctors. Why is that story not told? And the only story that is being told is how those boys became criminals and they started raping and murdering, and finally the community killed that woman.
Yeah.
So we're finding ourselves at the disadvantage about ourselves most of the time. But I think also us as storytellers, we are helping the situation. I mean, the other time I was making a funny comment and I was saying, in South African context now, I watch television and I watch a show about drugs.
Yes.
And I ask myself, who is that investor who will put millions in producing a show about drugs in a country where you have problem about drugs, but you are showing a family that is living out of drugs? You know, so it's not logical. That's why I'm saying, even the choices of the angle of the stories we are telling, we are not telling them from positivity about ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, which is something that I feel strongly that we might have taken over maybe in the last 30 years, but I think one thing that we haven't taken over is the narrative about ourselves.
Yes, our stories are still not being told.
Our stories are not told. No, not even, I don't care who is involved in that story. It can be white or whatever color. All I'm saying is, I feel strongly that we haven't started telling black stories from a point of black perspective.
Yes.
But also we haven't started telling the positiveness about ourselves.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Usisibongi, the one who writes for Generations, Usisibongi Ndaba, and she was telling me, Uguti, one of the things that she wanted to do when she first entered the writing room of Generations was that she wanted to do exactly that. Shift the narrative away from black stories being about drugs, being about crime,
raping each other all the time. Yeah.
That is why she...
But in actual fact, we're not even aware if we promoting the narrative of the funder. Because the funder is open an organization that deals with rape, or the funder has opened an organization that deals with AIDS, or the funder is funding this. So we're not even aware on who are we playing towards, who's benefiting in these stories that we are telling. But we're not just telling a simple story about our people. A guy who came back from exile and life became tough. He never joined the SADAF, and he started a garden, and now he is hiring 100 people.
He's supplying supermarkets.
Yes.
We don't hear those stories.
No, we don't. We're not telling stories of ourselves.
Abutimbo, I'm going to take you to the funeral scene. And I'm going to need you guys to see the show. I am not going to explain the funeral scene. Book the tickets, go and see Sarafina at the Joburg Theatre. But what I will tell you is that the scene is mimed. You don't see the caskets, but you can see the graves, and it's a mass gravesite, as it is for those of you who have seen it in the movie. It's a mass it's a mass burial. But what I want to ask, because that is one of the scenes that left me really, really disturbed by where we come from as a country. What were some of the emotions among the cast members when, in the first few days of rehearsal, before they got used to the fact that, okay, I'm going to be playing this very emotionally taxing scene? What did the cast go through emotionally on the first few days of rehearsing the funeral scene?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of discussions around the past. I had moments where we were just talking about what happened really in the past. And I mean, if you look at the piece, there's a line by Sarafina where she says, she tells this young boy that your fathers killed our fathers.
A white young boy, yes.
Yes, that our fathers were shot at the back because our fathers didn't have guns.
Yeah.
And immediately what comes into your mind as an audience member, if you think of Sharpeville, a whole mass funeral of coffins put there, you know, that comes into your head. And I think that scene, we shouldn't take away the brilliance of Ngema himself. That scene is almost a replica of what
Sharpeville, yeah.
Yes, for me, you know, because it gives you an image of mass scenes. But in actual fact, if you go back historically and you look at the history of the country and you go to a lot of pictures and see Avalon and Winnie Mandela talking, whatever, you will see that in most of the time, it was normal to have mass burials.
Because our people were not being killed one by one.
Yeah,
they were being massacred.
Yeah, they were killed in numbers. You think of Bipato, you know. I mean, even now, latest, you can think about Marikana. You can think of, you know, where our people have been buried in or killed in masses, in numbers. I mean, that scene could exactly just be, if you remember the image on television, on how they were wiped off in Marikana. If you remember that scene, how the bodies were just left lying down. And that's what that scene does.
Yeah. It's what you were saying when we were describing the relevance of Sarafina, to say, Uguti, it may be telling the story of what transpired in 1976, but some of those things are still ongoing today. Actually, a lot of those things, most of them, are still affecting our lives today. Mpho, were you also running around when they were dancing and singing? Hey, the stamina in that show.
No. With Makumete, she's the choreographer. And I mean, we worked very well. We created time for choreography. We created time for music. Even if our time was short, but we worked out a way that I feel so honored that I was actually given a team that they could allow me to lead them. You know, I was saying to somebody that I feel strongly that Sarafina is like a pinnacle of my career. Everything that I wished or done or whatever, but for the reason that I was the one chosen to be the first production after Babungiama's death to honor him, that I must lead it. It takes a lot out of me. I'm so humbled and overwhelmed by the entire process itself, because I might have not felt I'm ready to be there, you know, which is the biggest shoes to can wear. Somebody asked me, are you sure? And I said, let's see. And I think we had a beautiful spirit. And if it's his spirit and our ancestors, all of us, whatever, but the entire process was just blessed, one way or the other.
Look, the show is brilliant. He was a brilliant producer and he created a lot of jobs in the arts industry. But I would not necessarily want to put the focus on him, because this very same theater that we are in today actually had booted him out, as did other theaters and other television productions, because of the allegations that were put against him of him being sexually inappropriate towards some of the cast members, actually. So my worry with that is, brilliant as he was, some of his victims are still alive, and I would not then want to be disrespectful to what their experiences and their suffering by putting too much of a spotlight on the man himself. I would just prefer for the focus to be on the actual show.
You want me to say something?
Please.
Because I will say something.
You always do.
I wouldn't go with the context of how you are phrasing it, but I will go with the content of the work the man has created, and because we all have flaws, you know, and no one is that perfect, and we all grow to find ourselves as the journey unfolds of our lives. But one thing that I feel honored is for me to be able to recreate his work, because his work stands out, and I will close it there.
And you did it brilliantly. I want to take it back to the music, because of the music, and I appreciate the fact that apart from me being said about our father, you kept most of the music that you kept. The funeral song, there's something that has always stayed with me. Even before I saw the first time that I saw Sarafina on stage, even from the movie itself, there's a part where they are doing the ooh, and then there's somebody who is standing and they're relaying their stories and they're telling the stories. Even right now, as I am saying this, my heart is, because it's such a powerful, such a moving, and yet such an emotionally daunting thing to witness that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna keep taking you back. That whole scene, including the killing and the funeral and whatever, is the brilliance of Ungema. Literally, that scene, it's a total...
That scene is brilliant.
It's an exact replica.
That scene is brilliant.
It's an exact replica of what he did in the others. I mean, from memory of what everyone was giving to me, it was more of a memory. And I think our emphasis was, it shouldn't come beautiful. It it should come out emotional.
It's my favorite scene.
It needs to go deeper.
Yeah.
So if in theater there's something we call a coloring process. How do we color these scenes so that these scenes do not look the same? And if we were to color that scene, we will go more black so that it gets deeper and deeper emotional for the audiences to realize that it was not child's play. People were being killed and people were being buried in mass graves, some were just thrown in graves. It was bad.
It was really bad. And it actually takes me to what you said in the beginning of the interview when you said you don't want somebody leaving and be like, oh, that was such a wonderful musical. That's my favorite scene, but that's also the scene that messes me up emotionally out of the entire play. And then one of the other, just musically, I like how towards the end of the play, they then change out of their school uniform. Then now it's colorful. What informed the directorial decision?
No, that has always been there, because in Sarafina itself. So there's something about Sarafina that I was telling. There's one young man who is a student at Vets and studying drama, and I was just saying, majority of them really studied drama, the young people. But I was just saying to them the other day that I think if I were to write this I was telling Brajeri Mufuke when he came to see it, and he said, how was the process? And I said, I feel I could write a paper.
Please write a paper.
About the process.
Please write. We'd love to read it.
A creative journey, about the whole piece, but write it in a way that we could engage with it,
Yeah.
I've actually realized that Sarafina is not a chronologically written production. It's not written...
in terms of time, time
so it's
eras
more,
following each other.
It's more of what we call a collage.
Yeah.
So collage is pieces of stories that we had find a character to can knit them. But the stories have, even if they do not have direct link, they might have emotional link to one another, because they might be telling same stories,
and they
similar
lead,
stories.
even if
so as a result, they are able to build up to a certain explosion, right? So the explosion to the funeral, everything leads towards that, and that becomes your explosion. But it was also going towards the end of the year at the school. And the
concerts.
Yeah, and the students were going to have concerts. So it also just take you up there into that burial, leaves you in that emotional, while you are at that emotional state hanging, and then it transcends immediately into a joyful moment.
Yeah, a bit of comic relief. Speaking of comic relief, I love Mistress Pizzi. I was really hoping that she could join us, but she's actually on stage right now. The team is actually performing at the moment. She is such a ball of energy.
Yeah.
I was telling my editor that she reminded me of Hilda from Maudela Queens, because I came to see them last year at Joburg Theatre. And I'm looking at this lady and I'm like, when I'm 8 years old, that's the kind of energy I want to have.
Yeah, I think Mistress was able to wear it like a glove.
Oh, she was brilliant. There's this kicking move that she likes to do.
Yeah, that's the original
yes.
kick that was there with all the characters that Ingama created of the mistress. Every mistress said that.
Yeah.
It's a pity.
Everything was a pity.
Everything was a pity. Yeah.
Why is Sarafina yellow bone?
You see, that's a color. That's another color thing, which for me never applies. It never applies, because even the lady herself, as Sarafina, was light in complexion. Light skinned.
Let's not even dwell on that.
Yeah, so Sarafina has got nothing to do with color. Sarafina can appeal to young white people, because also it tells them about the history of their own parents.
Of their own parents and grandparents, yes.
And all of that. Yeah. So for me, it's a story beyond race.
And I like
it's a story of time. Yeah.
I like when you're referencing it to white kids, because now, obviously back in the day when 1976 was happening, our parents, our uncles, they were not integrating with the white kids. Sarafina only got a chance to speak to that little white boy because her mom worked for his family. But now, today, our kids, our nephews, our nieces, our siblings are integrating with white kids.
No,
and
but
they get to have these conversations.
But also besides that, there's something that we might ignore. the integration part of black and white people, even then during apartheid, what's happening behind closed doors?
Behind closed doors, yes.
Because we will go and visit our parents during school holidays in that white person's house, and we will play with the kids, you know. So that integration started a long time ago. There are so many young white boys who are now coming back and say, I'm looking for this woman.
She raised me. I've seen those stories on
here's
social
my
media.
token of appreciation.
Yeah.
But because it happened so long
ago. Yeah.
There was no way we could have stopped the society. I don't think the white people, there's a way they could have stopped the society to reach 1994. I don't think so.
No, my
beyond politics.
My point with integration was, it's not only important for us as black people to have these conversations with our kids, but it's also important for the kids themselves to have these conversations with each other as peers.
No, they're in the same class, in the same school. So for now, it's totally different. Yeah. And I think the only thing about integration is that integration should be real in terms of power dynamics. You know,
yes.
It shouldn't be because you're much more powerful or you have than I don't and all of that, and therefore
the economy as well.
I'm more of your subordinate and all of that. It shouldn't be like that for me, integration. And that's why when I was talking about stories, that we are not yet telling the true stories of ourselves, is that in most of the time, who leads the stories we are telling? Who is in the forefront of the stories that we watch on television? Who are the biggest producers of all those stories and things like those, you know? And then they dictate who funds them, who gives them money and all of those things. So there's just a lot we haven't started dealing with, even if we talk about integration, but even if we're talking about the arts and the role that the arts must play in a society. You know, because one of the other things I always say, the arts should remain the voice for the voiceless, but the weapon that you could be able to use to mobilize, to educate the society at all times.
Obal Jongani said recently to me, Uguti, he doesn't think that some people understand the role of the arts and artists beyond being entertainers, and it's exactly that, educating, being a voice.
Mass mobilization, there's a lot that the arts can do in a society, but I think we're not claiming enough the black agenda. And when I talk about black agenda, is being deliberate at all times, that it's us, this is my story, it has to have the truth about me.
It has to tell, my story has to be told authentically.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I don't think most of the time we're that honest ourselves as storytellers or as actors or whatever. Because even if I read a scene on set and that scene doesn't represent me the way it should be done, you will not be able to say. And that's why we watch a lot of stuff on television that is misrepresentation of who we are. But the line that everybody else is, no, this is television, it's not the reality. We are trying to mimic life.
Okay, we will close it off there. Thank you so much, Mpho, for joining us today.
No.
Please, guys, do go and see Sarafina, and if you are able to, please sponsor a child to go and see the show at the theater. Particularly, I would really like for school kids to see the show. I would really like for young people to see the show, because as Mpho was saying, Oguti, this story is also about how young people mobilized themselves, because this was not something that some grandfather said and said, yeah, you kids from this high school are going to do this. They did this themselves. They orchestrated it themselves. So yeah, it's very important for young people to mobilize. Yes, thank you so much. We'll close it off there. Studio Press with Mpho Molepo.
Thank you.
Thank you.